Alistair Darling, in the last 10 days, this campaign has taken a rather nasty turn. It seems everybody is telling the Scots what they can't do.
Well, I disagree with you. What's happened in the last few days is that one issue which has been central to this campaign for a long time, and that is what currency would we use in the event of Scotland becoming independent, that's come to the fore. What is clear is that a currency union of the sort that Alex Salmond dreamt up a couple of years ago is not going to work. It's not going to happen. And what we're now finding is that he won't tell us what currency you'd use instead of the pound. Now, when you think about it, the currency you use, the pound you've got in your wallet or your purse, is absolutely critical to the future of the country, critical to jobs, critical to people's individual well-being. So that is what is now centre stage, and it's likely to remain so.
But this is a law-abiding, prosperous, capable society. Everything is possible. It will be sorted out. If the people will it, that they want independence, a way will be found. And you, as a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, know that better than anybody.
I've always said that it's up to people in Scotland to decide what we want. But if you take a currency union, what it means to make it work, and you see this with the Eurozone, is you need a banking union whereby the rest of the UK would agree to underwrite Scotland's banks, which are the financial services sector here is about 12 times the size of our GDP. You would need a fund to ensure there was sufficient money if there were bad times, shocks to the system, a fall in the oil price, for example. You could have transfers of money. You also have to have fundamentally the same economic policy. In other words, you can't have divergent tax and spend policies because you'd have a common monetary policy. Now, all those three things are just not right for either Scotland, because it would lock it into a straitjacket with the very country it just voted to leave, or the rest of the UK, which you'd be asking them to take on something they had never ever signed up to. That's why it won't happen.
But all the signs are that you people are frit and that you're stirring the fear pot, trying to frighten Scots into believing in some way they can't go it alone. This is desperation.
Well, that's not true, and if you come up here, you'll see that it's not true. What is happening at the moment is that we have a pound, a common currency. You have it, and it works because it's underpinned by an economic and a political union. What the nationalists are doing is putting forward a different proposition. And remember, until recently, they used to refer to the pound as being a millstone around Scotland's neck. So their attachment to a currency union is something that is, fairly recent. But we're entitled to ask questions. If there is no currency union, and I don't believe there is going to be a currency union, then what is the alternative? Are we going to have a new currency? Are we going to have to join the euro? Are we going to use the pound like Panama uses the US dollar? Now, it is not unreasonable for those of us who actually live in Scotland, who intend to be in Scotland after the referendum, to ask Alex Salmond which of those options are we going to be stuck with.
Even so, even you must be beginning to feel a bit ambivalent. I mean, the way in which the Scots are being talked about by outsiders is as if they were a third world country. The fact of the matter is it's a developed country which may or may not have the desire to go it alone. And if they want to go it alone, everybody in this country will find a way of working with an independent Scotland.
Look, for goodness sake, I haven't heard anyone talking about Scotland on those terms, frankly.
Well, what about Mr Barroso? What about Mr Cameron? What about Mr Osborne? All these people have been going up to Scotland or staying in a studio in London and telling the Scots they're not up to it.
I just profoundly disagree with you. And if you take David Cameron's speech, it was really a call to arms for the rest of the UK. If you take George Osborne's speech, he, Ed Balls and Danny Alexander, who happens to be Scottish, they all said the same thing. They don't think and don't believe a currency union will work. And I'd say, tell you something else that you might ought to bear in mind. Even if the opinion polls here are half right, most people in Scotland are not convinced by Alex Salmond. So it isn't a fight between Scotland and the rest of the UK. And also, I am Scottish. I'm fiercely proud of being Scottish. I think highly of my country. I just think we'll be better and stronger if we're part of the United Kingdom.
If you believe the polls, and you clearly do, then you would also believe the reality, which is that in the last 6 takings of any polls, they have been tightening, not dramatically, but edging slightly towards...
Yes, a tiny bit, yes.
Yeah, well, that can grow into a bit of a landslide, and you people are panicking.
Oh, for goodness sake, the opinion polls have hardly changed in the last 6 months. And, you know, we will continue to mount a campaign that is strongly positive about the United Kingdom and about Scotland's future in it, because of the jobs, because of the opportunities and the security that come of being part of something bigger, our influence within the European Union. And we know that small countries have far less influence than large countries there, as well as the strong bonds that have been built up over the last 300 years that have seen Scotland and the rest of the UK do better than they would ever have done if they'd been apart.
Was it a bright idea ever to have a referendum called?
Well, you know, I've always thought that a referendum was a distraction, but once the Nationalists won a majority in the Scottish Parliament in 2011, and part of their platform, quite legitimately, they could call for a referendum because you know, they stand for independence. That's the whole point of the Scottish Nationalists. Once that happened, a referendum was pretty much inevitable. And now we're going to have this. I mean, I'd rather it wasn't a 2.5-year campaign, because that's longer than they take to elect the President of the United States. But I think now we've got it. Let's get the issue decided, and let's hopefully put the thing to bed for a generation so we can get on with the things that actually affect many people in Scotland, like our education, our health service, as well as, of course, our economic well-being.
You have said that you're a proud Scot. Let's be real. I mean, if independence wins, you'll still live in Scotland, won't you?
Yes, I've always said I will, and I'll continue to live here, but I just think that the country in which I live would be better and stronger. We've got better job prospects if we are part of something bigger. You think about it from the business point of view, they have an unimpeded market where they have no currency difficulties, no barriers, of 63 million rather than, you know, some 5 million. So there is a massive advantage to us as being part of the United Kingdom, as well as the other things that I said. So, you know, the issue before us is whether or not we end that 300-year history, we put up a barrier where there is none at the moment, or whether we actually build on the potential that is in the United Kingdom.
But as a final point, I mean, talking about barriers, it would be Britain, whatever you call the entity that's left, that will be putting up barriers against the Scots. I mean, can you imagine that with a balance of trade, which is actually in the London favour, if you want to put it that way, that we'd actually tax the Scots to buy our products?
Well, no, look, if what you're getting at is the point that Alex Salmon was making today, that if Scotland becomes independent, there is a cost in trading across a border that doesn't really exist today, that is true. It is a consequence of independence. But the way to avoid
can you imagine
that,
the English doing that?
To break the break in the first place.
Can you imagine the Sassenachs doing that?
Well, I wouldn't refer to people living in England in what, you know, the way you use it, a pejorative term. What I'm saying to you is the advantage of both countries, the rest of the UK and Scotland at the moment, is we don't have an artificial barrier to trade that would put up costs. If you have independence, you do get that. And that is, you know, Salmon is complaining about it, but it's a very problem that he's created of his own making. If you don't have independence, you don't have that problem. And I can't actually see for the life of me why he wants to go into a currency union that would actually lock Scotland into an economic policy dictated by what would be its much larger neighbour. No, we're far better and we're stronger as part of the United Kingdom. That's why we'll continue to ask questions, because frankly, when you ask the nationalist questions, you find the answers are pretty thin.
Alistair Darling, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.